Tonight I am looking at bolting in the rear hubs and the back plates and all the different bits and pieces that seem to go with it. So there's kind of a sandwich of parts here. This is the end of the axle. This kind of fits over there, and the half shaft runs through that. There's a plate with an oil seal that runs on there, and this is what bolts, the half shaft bolts up against that. Then you've also got the brake backing plate and this lozenge shape plate, which is also for the brakes. So I believe the way this goes is that obviously fits on there, and this fits underneath all of that. So this fits in there like that, and they're all held with these special machined bolt heads, because they have to go through there and then they need clearance. So these are the original ones. I cleaned all of these up. I do have half a new set of these. For some reason I only bought 8 at some point a long time ago, probably not realizing what they were or what I needed them for. So I've cleaned up the old ones. I'm going to reuse those. I've had to remove the axle trunnions just so I can get these in, otherwise there's not enough room. And I'm also, while these are off, I will drill the tops of these for a grease nipple. So I'm going to try and assemble all of this. I've got the copper grease because I want to rub that between all the mating surfaces so that I don't just have metal to metal contact. I've got something in there to stop it all corroding in the future. I think that's the plan. This is the rear hub and the backing plates all in place and all bolted up. 8 bolts to hold that on. One thing worth noting is the nut that holds the bearing in place has a locking ring. That's them over there, and that spring ring fits through a hole in the nut and through a hole in the hub end. So I just made it so that that hole was at the top, just so that in the future when you're taking this apart and putting it back together, it's easy to know where the hole is to get the spring through. This is where the backing thing goes. So that'll go on there. I'm not going to push it on yet. I'll smear all of this in grease before I put that oil seal on there, because the seal has to run on that. So you want a bit of grease there to lower the friction. And the half shaft should poke through there, hopefully. I haven't actually tried it, but I'm assuming that's all going to mesh up with the differential okay. I did have to lift it up onto the block just to be able to get behind there. So now I've done one side, I'll do the other side, and I'll give the bare metal a bit of a degrease, and I'll give it a spray of paint just to stop everything rusting. Now that I've got that side on and I started doing the other side, I suddenly doubted myself as to whether or not I've assembled it the correct way around. So I went back to the books to try and see if I could find anything, and so far that's about the best diagram I've found. So the back plate definitely goes straight over the little hub thing, and then the only way that lozenged shaped plate, it's quite hard to say, can go is on top of the backing plate. So I'm pretty sure that's correct, and you can actually see in the rust pattern on this where it's corroded in the past, where that plate is sat. So I'm pretty sure I've got it the right way around. This is the other reason I'm putting copper grease between everything, because you can see where this is rusted and pitted in the past. So I just want to prevent that happening in the future. On the back of it here, you can clearly see the rust pitting and where this was sitting up against the housing here in the past. This one here, this hole is for the bush that the brake camshaft goes through. So that lines up on the front of the axle, and that shaft goes back through into here. It actually pivots in here, and these holes go right through into the axle housing. So there is supposed to be a felt seal inside there which stops all the oil just leaking out, but allows a little bit to come through to lubricate the brake shaft that rotates in there. So I'm not sure about those little seals, what I'm going to do there, or how I make those. I'm not sure if those are actually available or not. So that's the rear axle back plates done. I've given it a paint touch up just to stop everything rusting. I'm still not sure if this is the paint I'm going to use ultimately. I suspect what'll happen is I'm not going to paint the car apart from these light coats to stop it rusting. I'll have to build the entire car, have it looked at by the Vintage Car Club too, so they can say yes, it really is a replica of a Brooklands. And then you have to take it and get it registered, and that often involves another inspection. And when they inspect the car, they want to see it not in bits, but I think ideally they want to see it as it's being built, which I can't do because you can't say it's a replica until you've finished it. But at the very least they want to see all the work and everything that's been done on it. So I don't think there's any point painting it until you know you can get through that process. And I think having the car as clean as possible before you take it to them so they can inspect it properly is probably a good idea. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm just using a paint I know will work, which is that engine enamel. I can spray it directly on the bare metal and it just stops. It'll stop it rusting for now. I think that paint would actually work pretty well long term as well. It's meant for engine blocks and things. It's fuel proof and oil proof. And it's not too thick. You see a lot of vintage cars, they always have a really, really thick coat of paint over everything. And I'm not sure I like that look. It always looks a bit overdone, a bit plasticky. So my excuse for this car as well, it was a race car. So, you know, it was stripped down and lightened, and just the minimal amount of paint put on it, just so they could go out and race with them. I have no idea what they look like from the factory. Of course, it's very hard to tell from all the old photographs and things. So that's my reasoning behind why it's all just painted this satin sort of black at the moment. The other thing I need to do, and I should probably do this before I bolt the rear axle to the springs, is I need to figure out what shims go in here. So there are metal shims, so that when you bolt this onto the back of the gearbox, there's space there for the ball end of the torque tube to move. How you figure out exactly what shims you need, I'm not exactly sure, but I think what I can do is carefully bolt this up with the bolts evenly, so the gap around here is even, and basically bolt it up to the point where it starts binding. And I should be able to measure the gap with feeler gauges, I think. If you can keep it even all the way around, I think that'll be the trouble. The only other thing I can think of doing is making up shims and just bolting it together with different thickness of shims until I get to the point where it isn't binding up. I do have, these are the shims that came out of the parts car, which they're a little bit beaten up, probably need a bit of flattening, especially sort of there where it's been damaged. But, you know, these give me a starting point, I guess. The other thing I did do, but I forgot to film, and I'm not going to do it now with the paint all being fresh, is I did slide one of the half shafts in, and yes, it does all fit. It does engage with the differential. I didn't knock them all fully home, but I'm pretty sure they should all just go together when the time comes. I'm busy trying to get the torque tube temporarily in place. I thought it would just be a quick job, but it's taken me ages, because I had to put the the stud that holds the rear of the gearbox in place. And when I lifted the engine and gearbox up to screw that into place, I'd forgotten that the mock-up engine and head, the head isn't actually held by anything, so that promptly slid off and fell on the ground. That's an old one, so I'm not using that anyway. And just trying to get all of this to align is really tricky. So the only way I figured I could do it was to pull the drive shaft out and actually engage that in the spline in the back of the universal first, and then slide the torque tube forwards. And I may have hit a snag, which is there is very little clearance between the outside of the universal and the inside of the ball. So I'm just about to see if I can push that home, but it's really, really close. So it's going to be interesting to see if that will fit. I may have got as far as I can get tonight without help from someone. This does just fit in there. It's incredibly tight. And I may end up scuffing up the back of my little plastic bushes because I made them slightly longer, thinking that wasn't going to matter. But actually it does. But since the back of them doesn't do anything, that'll be okay. If I can get them to fit in there, it should be okay. I may need to trim those down with a scalpel or something. Just take them down to the size of the yoke in the middle. At the moment they're sticking up about 32nd of an inch or something. But I don't think that's what's stopping me push this home. The problem is I've got the drive shaft engaged at this end. So as I slide the torque tube forwards, you also have to get the spline to engage on the muff coupling, which is down inside here on the back of the pinion. So I need to push this in whilst turning this to get it all to line up so it clicks into place, and then it should all slide together. I think that might be a job for when I can get a bit of a hand and I can have someone pushing the axle forward while I rotate it through the gearbox, because that's the only way I can do it. It's a bit tricky to get the splines to line up. So I think what I'm going to do for tonight is pull this back out, trim the engineering plastic bushes so they're flush with the ends of the yoke. Then I know it's definitely going to fit into the ball on the torque tube, because it may just be binding up on that for now. And then I'll give it another try. Okay, this is getting interesting. I'm a bit puffed because I've been struggling with this thing. I could get it so that the drive shaft was engaging with the muff coupling, because I could turn the gear here and see the differential turning. I had to use a mirror so that from here I could turn it and actually see the differential gear in the mirror turning. But I just couldn't get it to go all the way home. I'm not sure which end it's binding up at. I'm pretty sure it's this end, which is the end that's been shortened. So before I put it together, I didn't really check that it would go all the way down on the muff coupling. I made it go, I made sure it fitted, but I didn't push it all the way home. So I may need to just deburr the end of that or something. But I thought what I'll do is I'll pull the drive shaft out and just make sure the torque tube actually fits over the universal now. I trimmed down the bushes just with a Stanley knife. I just had to shave a fraction of a millimeter off the ends. But now I can bolt this up and figure out what shims I'm going to need inside there. I have no idea how people did this on cars with bodies on them. I'm struggling, and I've got really good access to everything. So it's definitely interesting trying to get this together. I have the torque tube bolted up in place. I used some of those new bolts that I got the other day cheaply, and discovered that even though they're Whitworth 1/4 inch thread, the heads on them are actually 10mm, which is a little bit strange. So I'm probably not really going to be able to use those for anything on this car. But it's not quite even, but I've got it tightened up, and the torque tube is now jammed up. So you can sort of look at it and see the gap. And if I do that evenly all the way around, or as I mentioned, put little shims in there and tighten it up until it just starts binding, I should be able to figure out exactly what size shim I need. They only really come in standard sizes, so I think these two are both 10 thou. And I've got a feeling I'm just going to need one of those on this for it all to be free enough to move but have no play in it. I've also just laying the drive shaft out next to the torque tube. It should fit. It should be the right length. Whoops. So I can't remember exactly how far in this goes into the thing. It actually goes quite a long way that way, and there's the spring and plunger on the end. And this is about where the end of the pinion is, because the adjuster is here, of course, so you can get to it, and the shaft sticks out about that much further. So this should all go together. And I've also checked the spline on some old muff couplings, and it fits on there fine. It just slides on there nicely. I'm probably just going to give this a quick go over with the wire brush on the drill, just to make sure it's completely deburred. And I think it is just a matter of needing someone to help me by pushing the axle forward while I'm trying to rotate it and get it all in place.